Welcome to another new way for St. Mary's to engage with parishioners. This is Stanley Thompson, Youth Ministry Coordinator, and your host for this first episode of Pious Podcast. Today, I'm here to let you know what you can expect. This episode is a podcast about our podcast. How clever. A podcast, in case you didn't know, is an audio-only show ranging anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, maybe even more for some people. But in our case, I think ours will be an average of 7 minutes. The name of our show is Pious Podcast because if I have anything to do with it, it has to have good alliteration and be catchy. The goal of this show is to keep our listeners, parishioners or not, informed on religious topics, issues, personal stories, and even what St. Mary's Church has to offer. But we plan on having an interview in nearly every episode. Members of our youth group will choose a topic that they think people would like to know more about, whether it's the reason why somebody became a priest or sister, why does the Catholic Church believe in certain things, or even upcoming events so we can learn much more about them than, from a flyer. So, why we're doing it and maybe any inside stories. Now, this show is run by Youth Ministry because it gives a voice to questions that they want the answers to, but might not want to ask it directly to somebody in religious education or somebody at the church for fear of gaining individual attention for asking. I've been there. And that's one of the things that can hold somebody back from asking a question. Usually if they think it's a silly question that they should know the answer to already, or on the opposite end, a question that might not be church appropriate, but the church does have the answer to. I've experienced that in my 8th grade religious education classes, especially this year. But there should be something more than just that, and here it is. Okay, so here's the question. So where did this kind of production get the name podcast? So I did a little research. I already knew this, but I double-checked. In the early days of the iPod, this was 2001, you could start to download music from iTunes, but people started to make their own short talk shows, so the term podcast was created. As for us, we still don't have all the equipment we'll need to properly run a podcast, but we'll get by with what we have for now to get this off the ground. This will be available on our existing YouTube account as a separate upload after our live stream mass on occasions, which that's already on YouTube and Facebook, but also a website dedicated to this kind of stuff, which would be podomatic.com, all of which you can access using our app or website. Ooh, look at that, I got a message. It says, Stanley, of all the ways to reach out, why a podcast? Great question. I'm glad I made that up. Well, ever since the pandemic started, we've been relying heavily on video productions. Now, the problem with video productions is that it's pretty high pressure. Not only is it difficult overall to work on it in just a short period of time, but it's also difficult on the person we're recording. There's a great deal of waiting before recording, waiting in between takes, and they need to keep in mind that they need to look good for the camera, which if it's you that's being recorded, you'll keep thinking that you could look better. I always do. And I could. So, if your voice sounds okay in a podcast, you're fine. And that's all you need to worry about. Even if you stop midway through a sentence like I always do. What? Oh, okay. You don't have to start all over again. Just continue. Even for the listener, a podcast doesn't require full attention like a video does. As long as the content is interesting and the listener is willing, they'll keep listening. That being said, I think I should move on here. Okay, so for our listeners, mainly our youth, there's a link in the description of this podcast on YouTube or Podomatic that goes to a list of topics or questions that you may want to know more about. That's going to be there for every podcast, no matter where you're listening from, and even if you're listening to an old episode, the current survey can still be found right there. This is a great way to have the voices of our parishioners, youth or not, heard, while, like I said before, not gaining any individual attention, so almost anonymously. So check out what the options are this time around, and there's always the choice to voice your own questions as well. So what's in it for you, the listener? Well, I didn't mean for it to come to this already, but there's another link that parishioners of all ages, again, can enter to win a listener prize, which is a monthly drawing, and it is chosen at random. So please show your support by helping yourself. That's it. So in terms of scheduling, we have a new episode about every 3 weeks as we start off here, and there's plenty of ways to know when a new episode drops, and here they are. Social media for one, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, oral announcements after Mass, our weekly email. If you're not signed up for that, there's a link as well in this description. Another way to know is through our live stream. It'll even be played on our live stream after Mass. And above all, our highly coveted St. Mary's app, which is a great way to play the podcast too. So if you don't have it, it's free. It includes a lot of great stuff for you to use, I promise. Before we go, it's time for our positive and encouraging quote from the Bible, read by one of our youth.
Hi, I'm Vivian, and here's today's Bible verse. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
The darkness has not overcome the light, meaning God will keep us safe from evil. That quote was a pretty good choice, thank you. So, I think that covers what you can expect. This is Stanley Thompson here saying thanks for listening, and get ready for episode 2.